What's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. I hope you're doing well. I hope you guys had a great 4th of July and just getting back into the swing of things. I am excited to be here with you today talking about some listing tips. I've actually had a couple agents here lately that have been picking up some listings, so that's obviously a good thing. But they've also had a lot of listing appointments, and so they're asking me for some, just extra advice when it comes to kind of that listing interview process, and like just some ways to improve their presentation, and just ways to guarantee as much as possible being able to secure that listing. And so I put together some 5 tips today, 5 ways to improve your listing presentation. And we are going to talk all about that right now. So go ahead, guys, and give this video a like if you haven't already, and make sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel if you're not already. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to add the slides here, and we're going to kick things off. So number 1, the first thing, this is probably one of the most important out of the 5 things that we're going to talk about here today, is the pre-listing package, right? And having a pre-listing package, something that you deliver or give to the person before your actual listing presentation even begins. This will set you up for success. It makes the whole process so much easier. I promise you, if you're not already doing pre-listing packages, I would highly recommend you pay attention to this section, because we're going to talk about what goes into a pre-listing package, and all of that good stuff. So first of all, real quick too, I see we got Brock on the call. Welcome, Brock. We got Ohio Real Estate. What's up, Pam? How are you doing? Good to see you. Wherever you're tuning in from, go ahead and put in the chat where you're coming to this live stream from. I am actually today in North Carolina, just north of Wilmington, North Carolina. So you can see I've got some extra red on me today. I've been at the beach the last couple days over the weekend, and it is hot and muggy out here, but the beach definitely makes it nice. But that being said, guys, all right, we see someone from Augusta, Facebook user, can't tell who it is, but we got Augusta in the house. Central Florida from Todd. We got Adam from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Love it. Good to see you guys. What's up, Jake? Good to see you, Jake. All right, here we go. All right, so go ahead, guys. Number 1, real quick too. Tell me if you've already got a pre-listing package that you're using for your listing presentations. Go ahead and put that in the comments there as well. And as I go through these, if you've got questions, be sure to throw them into the chat there, and I will answer some questions live on the call. Also, if there's anything that I don't mention in my pre-listing package, an idea or anything like that you are doing and you are having success with it, be sure to go ahead and put that in there as well, and I'll go ahead and call those out on the live stream. All right, so Brock says, I do not have a pre-listing package yet. Okay, good. I love it. Well, we'll have you one after this call, Brock. All right, so here's kind of what you want to have in a pre-listing package. First of all, for those that don't know what a pre-listing package is, it's, any kind of material, marketing material, usually physical material that you will drop off before your listing presentation, or you could mail it if you do something like overnight or something quick that gets there, of course, on time before your appointment actually begins. But usually I've always just kind of dropped by the property, left like a little goodie bag with my pre-listing package inside of it. And I think it just really adds a nice touch, because not a lot of agents are going to do this consistently. And so you can put in there little treats, you can put in there whatever, little gifts, anything that you think will just add to your branding, add to, you as a person, and kind of just, making you separate from any other agents they might be interviewing. But first and foremost, these are what's actually goes in. These are kind of the necessities of what needs to go into the package. First off, I always put a home value range in there. So it'll be like a preliminary CMA. It's not going to be as detailed as the CMA that I'm going to cover when I go to their home and actually do the listing presentation. But it will have a range of values that, their property could be between. Obviously, because I've not seen their property yet, I don't have the exact, dialed in number just yet. But even still, just through looking at values online, driving by the front of the house, seeing pictures, you should have a pretty decent range of what it could be. And so you can make these a couple different ways. I was always a spreadsheet person, so I had kind of some spreadsheet stuff that I would make and put together. But you can also use RPR. Now, RPR is actually what I use for the full blown presentation when I go in there and go through the entire CMA with them. But you can actually do like mini property reports through RPR, which are very similar as the full blown like seller report. And that actually makes for a good valuation. Now, be sure though, if you are using RPR, to make sure to manually input your comparables. RPR will automatically have kind of a valuation set aside for the property, and sometimes it's pretty accurate, but a lot of times it may not be. And so by inputting your own manual comparables in there, it's obviously going to be much more accurate. So I'd highly recommend that. But then you can just use either that or Cloud CMA is another good one that you can use. It's kind of more graphical. It looks really nice, and you can kind of throw that in there as well. Just make sure though that if you do something like that, you have some kind of a cover letter or just like a little paragraph where you say, hey, I'm excited to meet with you. I put together some values. We'll discuss these further when we're in person, but I just wanted you to get a grasp or a handle on kind of what the market's doing right now. But once I've seen your property in person and walked through it, we'll have a better idea of what the valuation should or could be for us to list at. So that way they know, like, hey, there's some flexibility here, depending on how things go. And it kind of sets up the expectation for that appointment. The next thing that you want to have is a why you section, right? Like, this doesn't need to be super long. You don't want to go on and on about like everything that you've done or all your accolades and things like that. But, basically, real, like if you were in an elevator pitch and somebody was asking, you're in an elevator and you had to give a pitch about why somebody would use you as a real estate agent, like what makes you unique? What do you feel your strengths are? And just kind of like talk about something that makes you a little bit different. You can type it through. You can just talk about your background. You can talk about what you've done recently, but just something that's really from the heart, like from you. They can tell that you wrote it. And you don't have to update that very often, but maybe once a year or something, you can go back through and kind of change it based on some newer things that you've been doing. But in general, I didn't change the why you too much once I had made it. Let's see, staging guide. This is something that you can get from many different sources. But if you just go online and you look up, different staging guides or like home selling tips or like, best practices for listing your property, there's always like, really nice put together best practices. Might be like a top 10 list. It might be like 20 things that you can do to enhance the curb appeal. Any of these types of things where you can go online, put it together, and basically, give that as a one pager of almost like a checklist of what the seller may want to do, or at least start thinking about to getting their property in peak listing condition. That's always going to be very, very handy for your seller. No pun intended. And so that is something, again, you can go online and get. I even, one of these days, I know I can go and grab mine. It's branded all for my stuff, but it'd probably be good to have a template for that of what I use, and that way I can share it with you guys. But it's not super hard to create. The biggest thing is just going and kind of taking a few hours and investigating, like, what are some of the top things sellers want to do to get their house ready, and making a little checklist. It's in my seller guide. I have an entire home seller guide that's part of it. But if you just wanted to have one page that kind of talks about that and kind of piece this together, that's totally fine too. Next is some form of evidence of success. So, you can have some testimonials. You could have proof of some other listings that you've recently sold. The biggest thing here is just to giving, a confidence that the person, that is choosing to use you knows that, hey, even if you're brand new, you have some, backing to why they should, believe what you say. And so it could be just any testimonials that you get about your character. If you maybe you don't have reviews yet on your Zillow or your Google profiles, just get something on Facebook that you can literally take, clips and put them into a one-page document that shows like that people believe in you, and people have done business with you, or they believe in your character. Anything that really just goes to speak about you from other people, right? Some other evidence of success. If you've sold other properties, then great, throw that in there too. Say, hey, we sold these 3 properties. If they're in the neighborhood and you want to customize this page here specifically to match the neighborhood or the property that you're selling, then that's even better. But if as long as they're relevant and they just show, hey, within the last little bit, I've done this amount of business, I wasn't necessarily changing this page for every single listing appointment that I went on. So that's just one of those things where, like once you have some stuff, you might update it once a year, once every 6 months. Or like I said, if it's a really high value listing, you really want this listing bad, you might go in there and customize the testimonials. You might go in there and customize the exact evidence of success, like those listings that you sold recently or buyers that you helped in their neighborhood, to be more relevant. But for the most part, I think just putting anything in there that shows some track record is going to be better than not having anything. Marketing plan. I do put my entire marketing plan in there just so they can review it prior to our meeting. That way, I don't just have to sit there the entire meeting going through like all of the little, different things that I do, but literally my marketing plan has everything from, putting a sign in the yard to open house to calling agents and, doing an email blast for agents, to any kind of social media that I'm doing, whether it's social media, organic, ads, all that kind of stuff, making a listing video, getting professional photography, everything. I mean, literally list out every little piece of thing that you do, to where you might have 40 or 50 items on there. And sometimes get creative, I mean, as long as you are doing them or you're going to do them for their listing, put it in there. And that way it lets them know like, oh my gosh, this person does really work for their money, right? They work for their commission. They're going to earn it, versus just, throwing it into the MLS and hoping that somebody comes along. And I'm telling you, especially now more than ever, sellers are wising up to that. Back in the last couple of years, it's not been maybe as important. Sellers even knew that, hey, you could pretty much just list it, you're going to get multiple offers. But I think it's starting to shift. I'm starting to see sellers that are feeling where, they know that it's going to take a little bit more effort to either sell their home or to sell it for what they want to get out of it. And that's the hardest thing now, is because in this last little bit, sellers have been getting pretty spoiled, right? The prices just keep going up and up and up. And now there's more price reductions. There's more homes that are sitting a little bit longer. And so you really got to talk about the things that you're actively going to do to market that property and get, multiple offers still, or to get the highest price possible still. Vendor guide. I like to, especially for things that are relevant in that staging guide, I like to have some vendors that can perform some of the work for people. So, handymen, landscapers, electricians, plumbers, all of those types of trades. If you've got a vendor list, or if you don't have one yet, build one. Get 2 to 3 vendors for each, kind of trade that's most common that people need when they're getting their house ready for sale. And put that in there. You can utilize Yelp to find vendors. You can utilize Facebook groups and just asking your community, hey, who do you like to use in this particular for this trade or whatever, and just get some names, numbers, and put them together into a vendor list. That goes a long way for clients. And at this point, this is all free value that you're adding, right? Like they know that they've not signed up with you. They haven't signed any listing agreements or anything like that. And so it puts in their mind like, oh my gosh, if this person goes to these lengths and they give me all this stuff for free, I can only imagine what I get when I hire this person to actually work for me. Right. So like, that's like what you want in their minds as you're coming up with this pre-listing package. And then the last thing is just a listing timeline, where I'm basically outlining what they can expect from start to finish, right? Like from the day they hire me, at the listing appointment, to where we get the property under contract, to where we have inspections, appraisal, closing, and just kind of having a little timeline that goes through that entire process, right? And there's, I know at least with my brokerage, they actually have some of these within our marketing center, but you can actually find a lot of these online. I definitely would recommend that when you have all of these documents together, that you try and make it a cohesively branded, deal. So, I mean, yes, you can get all of these things and piece them together off on the internet, but then try and take the extra time to go on to Canva and make a template and just kind of put this information in there in an organized way, which, reflects your brand. That's going to go a long way for somebody actually getting this package and be like, oh my gosh, this person's got their stuff together. Look at what they do with this package. And if you're maybe not the most graphically inclined person, you can go on Fiverr, you can go on Upwork and hire somebody. And literally, if you've already got the template, if you are just saying like, hey, I want you to recreate this document, but put it in my branding, which is these colors or maybe this kind of scheme, it's very easy to do, right? And so just having that cohesively branded pre-listing package, I think, is really important. So, all right. So let's go ahead and see here. We got Cordelia says she is from San Antonio. She does not have a pre-listing package yet either. All right. Well, we are going to get you one. And I can see your messages. Yep. Let's see. I do KCM. Ohio says, yep. So you've got there. Let's see. Pam says, I'm going to add this to the show here. There we go. I do KCM, which KCM, guys, is Keeping Current Matters. And I love KCM as well. Great product. They have a $30 per month product and a $50 per month product where they'll give you all of kind of the marketing templates that you may need. And you can kind of go in there and customize it a little bit. It's not fully customizable, but for the most part, it'll do what most agents need. But it has really good templated buyer guides, seller guides, things like that. So it says here, plus a few I use depending on price point, client always looking for something more. Cool. Brock asks here, he says, should each one of these items be a separate page, or can some of these be combined on the same page of the packet? Yeah, I mean, it depends. When you start to see like sometimes like the YU may not be a full page, right? Like that might just be a quarter of a page or a half a page. And if that's the case, then yeah, you could add that to another page. There's no set rhyme or reason why each one has to be its own page, but this is just kind of the different segments that I want in the pre-listing package for myself. And so however that lines up for you, then do it like that. But they don't need their own page especially like, if you're trying to think like, oh my gosh, I've written everything that I want to write about myself and it's only a half a page, then just leave it at that, right? Like you don't need to fill up a whole page. But one of the things that I will say about the marketing plan, and this is important too, is not to just say what you're going to do, but show it as much as possible. So like if you've got professional photos from a listing that you've done before, then put a few examples of those photos in your marketing plan, or put it in your evidence of success, right? Or if you've got a listing video, add a link, even though this is, they're going to be getting this printed out most likely versus, being able to click on it, they can still type it in, and so if you have something that's like a YouTube video that's evergreen, what I would recommend doing is signing up for a service like Rebrandly, or I know there's quite a few of them. They're just basically those link shortener services. So you don't have this like pretty like ugly long YouTube link, and just get a Rebrandly link. And then put a link to that YouTube video where it forwards them, but make it pretty. Put like, like all mine are kylehandy.link/ whatever I want it to say, right? So I could say like, 123 Main Street, whatever, right? So that way in there, if I say, look, for an example of one of my listing videos, go check out kylehandy.link/ 398 Johns Road, right? And then they just type that in, and they can see an example of one of my listing videos if they haven't seen one already. And of course, these are all things that you can do in the listing appointment. But if you can kind of cut through some of that time to where you're not having to like show all of that stuff, they've already seen it, you're coming positioned as the expert. So then they'll have there's less selling you have to do in the appointment. They're either going to already probably like you, or trust you more than if they didn't have any of this stuff to begin with. All right. Let's see here. Perfect. Yeah, you could put a QR code. I love that. It's great suggestion. We had two people recommend that, putting a QR code. Justin Simpson and somebody on Facebook. Remind me too. Tell me what program are you guys using for QR codes? Is there a good platform that you like to use to create those QR codes? All right. Yeah. I'll be honest. Like I remember it seemed like 2 years ago, I felt like QR codes were kind of dying away. I was like, man, I feel like, I would use them and nobody would use them. I wouldn't even use QR codes myself. I'd see it and still wouldn't use the QR code. But now literally, I think more people are trained that it might've taken a little bit of time to adopt, but more people now are just using QR codes. So definitely that's a great suggestion. Go ahead and throw in there what you're using to create your QR codes. And I'll go ahead and throw that up here. All right. So that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is to tour competition homes. So how many of you guys are touring your competitors' homes, or like I say competition, but just like your comparable homes in your neighborhood? This is an especially good suggestion if you're a new agent or if you've not listed a property in that neighborhood yet or in that area yet. I would highly recommend that you set up to preview 4 to 6 similar homes in the area or neighborhood that are actively listed right now. And, and that's the thing is like, obviously, there's some people that say, well, yeah, but you're wasting, you're potentially wasting the time of of a seller, or you're wasting an agent's time or whatever. But here's how kind of I feel about that. We all are working buyers. I'm working buyers all the time. I myself, and I'm a buyer, right? And sometimes I won't push a home, or I won't even think to offer a home to somebody until I've seen it, right? But then I like walk through a house, and it might be walking through a house for somebody else, and I see this house, I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be perfect for so-and-so. And it's like, yeah, you can get that information off the MLS. You might have even seen it on the MLS or Zillow, but like when you're walking through stuff, you see things differently. So you're not completely just wasting the time of whoever, right? Like you actually are looking at this property. Potentially that property might be something you take back and say, hey, you know what? I was going through these homes this other day for a listing that I'm trying to take, but John and Susie, I think this house might have been a perfect fit for you. Would you like me to set up a showing? And so it's a great opportunity to learn more about the neighborhoods, to preview more properties, but then especially when you go to that listing appointment and you can speak firsthand about properties that are in that person's neighborhood. Because I promise you, that seller already knows the homes that are up for sale in their neighborhood at that time, right? Like if they're about to sell their home, they usually get real in tune with the market, right? Like they know the homes that are in their neighborhood. They're like, oh yeah, is that the one that's down the street on the left? Is that this, one with the blue door or whatever, right? Like they start to really know. And so when you can say, oh yeah, that house, I went in and, it is kind of nice, but it doesn't have, the wood floors like yours has. It actually has carpet, and then I walked through and the layout was kind of funny. Like when your seller or your potential client, your potential seller hears that you've done this and you've done this research, you've walked through properties, then at that point, they're going to be really impressed that you either, they don't know that you did it just for their listing necessarily. But even if they do, they're like, oh my gosh, this person's gone the extra mile. Right. And the thing is, when you do the showing, or at least what I would do is, is I would record a lot of the property, right? While I'm going through it. Make sure you have permission to record when you go tour the property from the agent, but I would record it because I wouldn't have my client with me. And obviously, because I didn't have an exact client for that property as I'm previewing it. But at the same time, I would say like, hey, I can send this video to my clients, right? And so that way, because a lot of times now sellers will have Ring cameras or they'll have cameras installed. And if they see like you just walking through the property, they'll be like, what the heck is going on here? But, I would record and then obviously I could watch back that video if I needed to remember something as I'm kind of like taking notes and whatnot. But I think more and more now that's common where like sometimes, you have previews where your clients are not with you. And so it's not going to be so weird when you go through a property without having a client with you. And then, like I say, when you do go through a property and if it's a good fit, if you had somebody that it could potentially work for, you can now send them a video and say, look, hey, I know we weren't really looking over here. I know we weren't thinking about this potential price range or this style, but man, I just walked through this house and this was really cool. You want to check it out? And you can send it to them, right? And so it's just extra value that you're adding there. But yeah, and then like I say, as a newbie, somebody who, let's say you haven't even shown a lot of properties to clients as it is, this is going to give you a good way to get into properties. Just getting familiar with opening the lockbox can sometimes be helpful, right? So like, just doing that, kind of touring the properties yourself. It's really low stress. It's just an extra value. And then it really makes you seem like what the neighborhood offers, what the different properties comparables offers when you're at that listing appointment. So that's important for the for sale ones. And then I also recommend you pull up like 3 to 5 sold listings, recently sold listings in that area or neighborhood. And obviously you can't go tour those anymore, but you still should drive by them. And take good notes, sit on the outside for a second, just kind of look and see, like, does that house seem like, is there something that's intangible that maybe you couldn't tell online, for one reason or another, like, that it either sold for less than what your potential listing is going to sell for, or maybe why it would have sold for more. Because maybe the pictures just show the property and mostly the inside, but then you show up in front of the house and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing's got a big old water tower behind it. No wonder why it sold for, $20,000 less than what mine might potentially sell for. Or there's some amazing feature that you didn't even realize, oh, this one's in a cul-de-sac and I didn't realize from the pictures that it was in the end of a cul-de-sac. And so now that's probably why it sold for, $10,000 more. But when you know that type of stuff, you can reference that in your listing appointment, and it just makes you seem obviously more knowledgeable about the area and the expert for their potential property. And there we go. And then just reference these in your listing appointment. So that is my tips there. Let's see. All right, let's go to the next one. Sharing your marketing plan. So this is during your listing appointment. This is where we're going to get into, you're actually sitting there for your listing appointment. You want to make sure that you cover what your marketing plan is. Don't just focus just on, the numbers or the CMA or, building rapport, all these types of things. I mean, those are all important. You want to ask lots of questions. You want to kind of do that stuff. You want to tour the property, let the person show you their property. But you also need to make sure that you don't overlook talking about the marketing plan. And that's why giving it to them in the pre-listing package is important. But then make sure you set aside time during the listing presentation to actually go through and talk about, what you're going to do, why it's a benefit to the seller, and then ask them their experience, see if they've ever sold a home before, and ask them, what did you like that your agent did for you last time you sold the property? Or what did they do marketing wise, or what did they not do marketing wise that you think maybe they could have or should have done, right? You want to ask them questions like this because you really are trying to understand what's going on in their head, to level with them, right? And if they have unrealistic expectations, if they have, just real kind of specific needs or desires, I mean, you want to address these things when you have the chance. And a lot of it for a seller is going to come down to your marketing plan, right? Like, what are you doing? Because that's what you can kind of hang your hat on and say, like, this is why I earn my commission. Yes, of course, it's my knowledge and expertise. But really the seller, they're going to value whether or not to go with you or not based on what they think you're going to do for them. And so by being able to show them, like, this is all the stuff that I do, like, I earn my commission, because I do these things for all of my listings, that I think it goes a long way with sellers. And so anyways, making sure you talk about everything that you're doing online, but also everything that you're doing in person. I mean, it could be as easy as like, I bring over waters and snacks, that, you leave out on your countertop. It could be all these like little things, but make sure you're listing them in there so they're seeing all of it. Providing examples of photographies and links to videos, talk about the signs in the yard, social media, open houses, all that good stuff. And then provide a timeline of just your marketing plan. So this is kind of like different from the timeline of the listing process, but talk about the timeline for the marketing plan. Like, hey, I need to set up photos now or within the next few days because it's going to take 3-4 days to get those back. And, in the video, and then, I usually will set up an open house on the first weekend that we have the listing go live. Does Saturday or Sunday work better for you? So you're just kind of talking through all of this stuff that's going to go through on marketing. Let them know that, hey, when we list your property, it might take up to 24 hours to syndicate out onto all of the sites. But, I put the property in the MLS, and then sometimes it might take a few hours to get onto Zillow or Realtor.com or any other sites that you might be looking at. So you're just kind of setting the expectations, but you're also proving that you have knowledge about this, right? Like you've done this before. Even if you haven't done this before, get a timeline, like ask a fellow listing agent, somebody who's listed properties in your market, in your company or whatever, and say hey, what's the timeline look like? That way, when you're there, you can explain it and it makes sense to the person that you're speaking with. All right. Now we'll talk about, providing a detailed CMA and net sheet. Okay. So who provides a net sheet for their listing presentations? When you go and do a listing presentation, are you providing a net sheet and going over a potential net sheet for your client? Let me know in the comments or in the chat if you are providing a net sheet, because I think we all do CMAs, right? Obviously, that's the kind of the biggest point of the listing presentation, is to kind of talk about value of the property. But then once you have established what the value could or should be, how many of you guys are going over a full net sheet and actually discussing, what the seller stands to gain or what they'll take away if they are to sell it for that potential price? This is very important. I know for me, I'll start with the CMA side of it because that's what the first bullet is. But I use NAR, National Association of Realtors Property Resource, RPR, and I've got some videos that talk about how I use RPR to create my CMAs on my channel. But I use RPR and I manually add my comps, right? Like sometimes it'll select all of them and it's perfect. Most of the time, though, I always end up changing a few things here or there, taking a couple out, adding a couple in, to make sure that it's as accurate as possible. But RPR does a pretty good job of getting a good valuation to use as your CMA. And so that's typically how I'll make my CMA, is through that. That's the only thing that I use to actually give to my client. Now, one of the things that I will talk about is I'll have another printout, or sometimes it was just like a spreadsheet that I would print out that had tax valuation, Zestimates, right? Like those two different valuations. And I'm not printing those out to say that's what your property's worth. I'm printing it out so that way they know that I know what these things say, right? Because a lot of times sellers are, that's what they see, right? So it needs to be addressed. It needs to be talked about in the listing appointment. You got to bring up the Zestimate. You got to bring up their tax values, talk about why they could be accurate or inaccurate, right? Depending on your area. Like I always knew in San Antonio, tax values were traditionally, historically less than the actual market value for the property. And sometimes up to 10%, right? Less. And so I would talk through that. We would talk through Zillow and Zestimates. And I would say, look, in where I'm at in Texas, it even says on their own website, Texas is a non-disclosure state, right? So they don't have accurate information. Their estimates may be inaccurate. I would show them a spot on Zillow's own website that actually showed a star rating showing that Texas was not very accurate for their valuations. And so go through that, have some thought about what your spiel is going to be when you talk about those different deals. And, maybe in this case, Zestimate was accurate to your manual CMA, to your market analysis. But if it's not, have a reason why it's not, right? Be prepared for that. Because I'm telling you, more than ever now, clients are looking at Zestimates almost like it's like the stock market, right? Like they're like, oh my gosh, my house price just keeps going up and up and up and up. And sometimes, obviously they have gone up here lately, but maybe not to the extent that some of the values have on Zillow. And so they just need to be aware of hey, I get what Zillow says, but here's what the actual comps say, and so go through that whole process with them. And then once you've established what their home should sell for, what it could sell for, maybe there's a range. This is where you start talking about the net sheet, right? And you kind of tell them hey, let's say we sell your house for $400,000, realistically, you're going to net, basically net, what I would always kind of go through. I mean, I'd have this all spelled out, like my title company would give me a kind of a template, a form, if you will, that I could put in, like what the price of the property I thought would sell for and what the person owed on the property. And then it put all the fees that were kind of associated with closing for the seller side. So it would have, real estate commissions, it would have title company fees, all that kind of stuff. It would take out their taxes, any prorations for, taxes, HOA, all that kind of stuff, and then literally spit out what their net sheet was. And so, like, you can kind of ballpark this. I wouldn't recommend you ballparking it, if you have the time to prepare it. But if you did have to ballpark this, usually what I would do is I would take 93% of whatever the or whatever the estimated sale price was going to be, and then I would subtract whatever their mortgage was. And if I could get the exact mortgage amount, that'd be great. If I could ask them, like, hey, do you know roundabout what it is? That would work in a pinch. But if you can get the exact, that's way better, because sometimes people are clueless. They're way off on what they actually owe on the property. So try and get the exact, get them to go to their recent statement, last bill, and see what the remaining balance is. But basically, let's say it was 400,000, they owe 300,000 still. Well, then I would take 93% of 400,000. Let me do the math real quick. 400,000 times 0.93 is 372. And I would subtract their mortgage, which if it was 300, then that means that they would potentially net $72,000. And so now, obviously, the reason why I do 7% is I would take 6% out for the commissions, 3% buyer's commission, 3% seller's commission, and 1% for title company fees. And that's kind of, a roundabout estimate. If in your market it's 5%, well, then maybe you do 6% as the total that you take away from their sales. The other thing that I would prepare them for, as I say, usually you also want to factor in about 1% that you might need for repairs or concessions, right? Seller concessions. And so, like, if it's a $400,000 house, that might be $4,000 that we have to either pay to fix things, or pay to have concessions. Now, obviously, in the last year to 2 years, all that has kind of changed. I mean, there's definitely been less concessions, less repairs that are being agreed to. But in general, you might want to talk through that, and just so that way they know that there may be additional expenses on top of what their net sheet actually says, right? So you say, hey, this is what you should net, but then you also may want to hold back a little bit in your mind, just from what you're going to fully receive, because you may have some concessions that you have to give up. So that's kind of how I would talk about that. Let's see here. We got, Jake says net sheet is a must. In his opinion, I feel it's typically what sellers ultimately care about and want to know. 100%. Yep. Don't go through the listing appointment and not have a net sheet, right? Yes, I love presenting the net sheet to the homeowner. Helps them get excited about selling. Exactly. Yeah, especially right now, guys. I mean, when you have equity in properties, which a lot of sellers do, it is great, right? And now I've also been in the market where, you do a net sheet just to see if the person is going to be able to break even or not, right? Because, like, maybe the market was not so hot. Maybe they just bought the home, like, a year ago, 2 years ago, and the prices hadn't appreciated enough. And then when you knock off 7%, they're lucky to sometimes break even in certain instances, right? So you got to go through that stuff, because they may not realize all that. And you don't want to just tell them, like, yeah, you may, sell the house for 300,000, and then you get all the way to where, like, you're about to close on the property, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, I'm underwater, or like, I'm not taking away as much as I thought I was going to. You never want to get put into that position of thinking, like, oh my gosh. In fact, I mean, I would even have my sellers initial a page, like when I'm doing the listing agreement, that actually has the net sheet on there, right? Like, estimated net sheets. So that way they could never say, like, I didn't talk about it. I didn't give, like, what was, approximate for them. And the net sheet that I got from my title company was really nice. It actually had a spot where I could initial or sign, and it said, like, this is an approximate, valuation. That way they could also come back to me and say, like, well, you said exactly that I would get this much. So you want to be careful. I mean, there are some things you want to think about there, but it is really good to go through it and just make sure that you are on the same page as your potential client. All right, let's see here. Next one. All right, so this is an important one. This is the last one too. So I said the first one was the most important, and it is the most important as far as like providing something. But this is probably the most important presentation technique. This is the most important thing to remember constantly when you're sitting there in front of the seller, and that's to listen and ask more questions or ask questions more than you speak, right? Like we all go there to the listing presentation wanting to present, wanting to like, speak. And sometimes when you're nervous, you'll actually speak more, even though you probably don't want to speak, right? But that's just natural. It's instinct for us to just like start talking a ton when you're trying to make a sale, usually, right? And so you have to stop yourself and remember this needs to be a dialogue. You need to be asking questions, sitting there, listening. Don't just like be ready to respond right away or point out what you do that's so great. Really listen and ask follow-up questions. Ask people like, why do they feel that way? Why do they like that? Right? Don't just go surface level, but go one step deeper, maybe two step deeper sometime. And the biggest thing is you really want to find what is their motivation, right? Like, why are they wanting to do this? How motivated are they? What happens if this doesn't work out, right? Like, so you got to find out all of these types of things, and you want to ask good questions to do that. And so when you're asking questions, you're not really talking a whole lot. Even while I'm presenting things like my marketing plan or the listing timeline, things like that, I'm still asking questions. I'm like, hey, did you, the last time you sold your house, did they do this? Did they do that? What do you think about this? Do you like open houses? Do you like X, Y, or Z? Like, have you seen my social media? I'm constantly just trying to get them to speak. So it's not just like me sitting around talking for 45 minutes straight without any back and forth dialogue, right? So you really want to try and focus on making sure they're talking more than you're talking. And you basically are having them show you how to sell them on using you, right? Like the more you get them talking, the easier it's going to be for you to close and get the business, right? Like if you're getting them talking, they're going to be telling you things and leaving clues all along the way. So that way, when it comes time to ask for the business, it's not going to be so overwhelming, right? Like you already know what's important to them and when maybe what's not important to them. So that way you just kind of go recap and you say, hey, this is important. This is important. This is important. I'm going to do all that stuff. This is my, this is what you're going to, receive from the property. Does that sound good? Yes. Perfect. All right. Well, let's go. Let's start working together. Right. Like versus like, if you're just talking the entire time and you don't know really what's important to them, you don't know what their motivation is. It's really hard to kind of close the conversation, to close the deal when you're doing most of the talking. So asking lots of questions. In fact, I just released a video on my channel where it was some of the top questions to ask sellers while you're at the pre-listing appointment. Or while you're at the listing presentation. So make sure to go back and watch that video so you can check out and see some of the questions that you should be asking. Because typically my process is when I first get to the property, I like to just sit down somewhere that's comfortable for them. Sometimes it's the living room, sometimes it's the dining room, sometimes it's the back patio. And literally I'll sit for 20, 25 minutes usually, just getting to know the person, just asking questions. They're going to want to like have you, tour the property and see the property. You're going to want to get into the comps and talk about the values, your marketing plan, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not doing any of that until I've just sat down, built some rapport, gotten to know the person. And it doesn't even matter if I already know the person, if they're a friend, I'm still doing that where I'm sitting down, kind of just taking the pressure off, asking a lot of questions, just really just kind of putting it on them, right? And just getting as much information as I can. And then I'll do all of the other stuff after that. But I think it's really important that you don't just jump into trying to present or just, jumping into your slides if you're coming with a slide deck or jumping into your marketing plan if you've got like a book. Like just sit for a little bit and talk and kind of figure out what their motivation is, figure out what their experience level is with selling homes, figure out what, their timeline is. And also if they're thinking about interviewing other agents or whatever, right? So you want to get to know all of that stuff up front. All right, let's see. Carmen asks if we've got an example of a net sheet. Carmen, I don't have anything that's like out public right now. I could definitely scrounge one up and put one in the comments or put one in the description of the video when it's done. but not just yet. But I promise you, if you go and I would go, depending on what state you're in, just go on Google, type in, California example seller net sheet, and you should be able to get one. But also, if you ask around for some different title companies in your area, you should be able to also get a net sheet that way, provided from your title company, which is probably going to be the most accurate. And you can also just ask them questions, because a lot of times it's broken down to a bunch of different things, and you might not understand like what that fee might be for. And sometimes the fees are relevant, sometimes they're not. They may not be applicable for a particular instance that you are doing. So it's good to know the fees too. So getting with somebody that's in title in your area, or an attorney that can kind of go over those with you, especially if you're new and you've never done it before, I think that's going to be really good thing to do. But if you just need one right now just to check it out, I would just go on Google, put your state, because they are going to change from state to state. So put your state and put seller net sheet and example. You should be able to get one. All right. There we go. Well, very good, guys. Well, that takes us to about the end of the presentation here. So if you've got any questions and you still want to throw them into the chat there, I'm happy to answer any more questions. Like I say, I'm excited. I'm actually, like I say, doing this East Coast tour, and I got to present last week, YouTube, actually some YouTube best practices to a group of about 50 agents in Charleston, South Carolina. And that was amazing. I'm hoping that we'll have a recording of that. I know that they were recording it, but if I can get that, I'll let everybody know where you can find it. But talked all about how to get started with YouTube for your real estate business. It was really well received, and probably a presentation that I think will help a lot of agents. But hopefully this was helpful on the listing side of the business. And if you got any other further questions, put them into the comments. I will respond to your comments. And or you can always message me on Instagram. Real Kyle Handy is my tag on there. But make sure, if you got value out of this video, to go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thank you again so much, guys. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you next Tuesday, same time, same place. Have a good one. Bye-bye.